I first noticed the shift in atmosphere that late spring when the lilacs began to bloom in the old garden my mother once tended. I was back home for the summer, 23, fresh out of college, hoping to save money before finally moving to the city. My childhood room still smelled faintly of lavender sachets and high school angst, and the worn hardwood floors creaked in the same familiar spots. But something had changed. My father had remarried 6 months before, a smart, ambitious woman named Claudia, whom I'd met only twice at quiet dinners. I'd assumed she'd draw up alongside Dad and find her place in this old duplex with the same fondness I had. Instead, she treated it, and me, as though it were her corporate office and I her unpaid intern. The first time she asked me to clean the upstairs bathroom, I didn't think much of it. After all, every teenager gets tasked with chores. But each week, almost ritualistically, she added another demand: dust the bookshelves, polish the silver, vacuum the living room rug. "There's a clump of dog hair over there," she'd say, pointing with a perfect, precise finger. One afternoon, she even confiscated the dustpan and broom from the hall closet to keep next to her swivel chair, insisting that I pitch in during my free time before Dad got home. At first I volunteered, politeness, blood memory. But I started noticing the way she rolled her eyes if I paused for a sip of water, or the impatient foot tap if I stayed upstairs a minute longer than she liked. My comfortable childhood home was rapidly becoming a part-time job. "Hey, Marcy," she'd snap one morning when I shuffled into the kitchen in my pajama shorts, carrying a mug of coffee. "Did you water the rosemary this morning?" It looked droopy when I passed by. She pointed at the windowsill as though it were lit up on a PowerPoint slide. "And don't forget to start the dishwasher before you head out. This isn't a bed and breakfast," her tone stung. That was the moment I realized I wasn't a welcome daughter here. I was a rental unit, a source of free labor. I looked around the kitchen, my mother's old teak table, the stack of my high school trophies on the shelf, the carrot cake she used to bake on my birthdays, and it felt suddenly alien. I swallowed hard. "Sure, I'll take care of it," I said. She gave me a tight smile, turned on her heel, and exited to her home office. I heard the door click, and I realized my alarm had just gone off. The sound of welcome had been replaced by separation. When I asked Dad, my own father, to intervene, he'd glance up from his newspaper, sigh, and say, "She's stressed about work. She wants everything perfect." He'd lower the paper again, eyes returning to stock tickers and sports scores, leaving me with the mental image of my home reduced to a showroom. I tried to joke about it with friends over morning coffee. "My stepmom's turning our house into her personal spa," I'd say, but they'd nod sympathetically as though my campus hassles were more burdensome than this quiet domestic tyranny. One evening, my friend Zoe raised an eyebrow. "Why don't you tell her no? She can't make you scrub floors for free." I would have, if I hadn't loved Dad too much to admit that his wife made me want to leave the house on purpose just to escape. Instead, I focused on slashing my grocery bills so I could stash more savings, rented a storage locker for my surfboard, and spent extra hours at my part-time barista job, pretending to train for my future career. I thought, if I can't stand up here, I'll just spend less time here. Then one evening, 2 weeks before my 24th birthday, I found the letter. I was polishing the silver again when I noticed a sleek envelope, embossed in gold, jutting out from under the welcome mat. The handwriting was unfamiliar: Mrs. J. Arlington. I peeled back the flap to reveal a formal notice: "Dear Miss Marcy Caldwell, please be advised that effective June 1st, 2025, the monthly rent for your continued residence at 28 Maple Avenue will be set at $800 per month. As per the terms of your tenancy, rent is due on the first of each calendar month. Failure to remit payment may result in termination of your occupancy." I blinked at the neat paragraphs: termination of my occupancy. They'd sent a warning letter to me, the stepdaughter living in my childhood home. My pulse thundered. I stared at the words: rent, tenancy, termination. They belonged on an apartment lease, not a family home where I'd lived since I was 6. My chest twisted. I trembled, thinking of those months of unpaid chores, the pointed looks, the way she'd pat my shoulder as though I were a young intern. She'd weaponized kindness with a landlord's notice. I sank onto the edge of the stairs, heart pounding. I knew my rights. Dad and I owned the house. I tried calling my father on speaker, voice shaking. "Dad, did Claudia serve me a rent notice? A real eviction-style notice?" My voice echoed in the empty living room. There was a pause, then his sigh: "It's just a formality, Marcy. We discussed it at dinner. You're an adult now, you need to contribute." "I didn't agree to pay rent," I said, furious. "I live here, it's our house." He cleared his throat. "You have a good thing. Free rent, food, utilities. It's not unreasonable." Just a way to prepare you for the real world. I stared at the envelope as though it were a rattlesnake. Prepare me by making me homeless? My voice was raw. At my own home? He didn't answer, but I heard papers rustle. Finally, Claudia's been talking to her lawyer. It's your coming-of-age thing. Pay it or move out. I slammed the phone shut. My vision blurred. Pay rent to the woman who barked chores at me. For a home I helped furnish. A home I loved. It felt like a profound betrayal by the woman who should have nurtured me, and by the man who should have protected me. I crumpled the notice in my fist. My jaw ached. My knuckles turned white. The house felt like a trap. I panicked. I had nearly a month to find $800, where savings ran low, and the barista gig barely covered essentials. Was I supposed to couch surf, crash at Zoe's, swallow my pride, and rent a studio apartment for $1,200 a month? It was unthinkable. I shoved the crumpled notice into my back pocket and marched to the kitchen. Claudia sat at the marble island, laptop open, a latte on a coaster. She looked up, cool blue eyes assessing. "Oh, Marcy," she said sweetly. "Got the letter?" I flung it on the counter. "What gives? You're going to evict me?" My voice trembled with anger and fear. She tapped the notice. "You're not being evicted. You're paying rent, like any adult." Her tone was clinical, practiced, as if she'd delivered this speech a dozen times. "Consider it a step toward independence. If that's too much, let me know, and I'll help you find a place." I stared at her, this woman who had no right to judge how I navigated college loans and part-time jobs. She had no idea what sacrifices I'd made to live here. She thought I'd been lazy, ungrateful, while she and Dad wiped away decades of memories and renamed the house her own. "Thanks, but no thanks," I said, voice cold. "I'll figure something out." She closed her laptop with a look of finality. "By June 1st, we expect to see that check. This isn't open for debate." She slipped her nails into the marble edge and pivoted on her bar stool. "Enjoy your evening, dear." I retreated with my hands trembling, the granite countertop cool beneath my fingertips. I rushed to my room, slammed the door, and sank to the floor. I felt dizzy, betrayed, powerless. Every childhood memory, the wallpaper I painted with my mother, the staircase where my father taught me to walk, seemed to recoil from me, recast by Claudia's outsider's decree. But then something ignited in me, sheer stubborn rage. She thought she could rewrite the past with a rent check. She thought she could strip me of my birthright with a lawyer's form. She had underestimated my will, my family bonds. The house was mine as much as hers. She'd awakened a battle that would end only when I reclaimed my voice. I breathed deeply, smoothing my tears. I'd pay her nothing. I would take back what was stolen, my home, my dignity, my rightful place. The question was how. Move out? Fight in court? Confront her publicly? Uncover her own secrets? I let the ideas swirl, adrenaline sharpening my thoughts. I rose and opened my closet door. From a cardboard box on the top shelf, I pulled down an old family photo album, my mother's handwriting on the spine, Caldwell's, Memories. I carried it downstairs, photo by photo, until Claudia descended the stairs, stopping at the sign of my return. I opened the album and pressed it onto the counter between us. Her eyes flickered as she recognized the wedding photo, my mother in lace, my father in a tux, me toddling between them. Then holiday snapshots, my first day of school, graduation pictures. "Do you know whose house this is?" I asked, voice steady. Claudia's jaw clenched. She blinked as if trying to recalibrate her rights to these scenes. I tapped the album. "This is why I'm here." Her hands twitched at her sides, and I realized she had no answer. She'd tried to buy legitimacy, but she'd forgotten the heart of a home, the people and memories that anchor it. She thought rent could erase that, but it couldn't. I closed the album and slid it back. "I'll see you in court," I said softly, then headed upstairs, leaving the silence between us heavy and unresolved. Behind me, the album lay open on the countertop, proof that some things cannot be rented, borrowed, or deleted. I climbed the stairs with a single thought ringing loud. She may own a title, but I own the story, and this story was far from over. That night, I lay awake on the edge of my old twin bed frame, now plumped with new pillows and bedclothes, listening to the low hum of our air conditioner. My head buzzed with possibilities and plans. I could ignore the rent notice, flat out refuse to pay, and force Claudia to sue me in court. But I didn't want a court battle if I could avoid it. I wanted a conversation, a reckoning, a chance for Dad to really see what she was doing. I drifted off with a single thought looping in my mind. Tomorrow morning, I would gather my evidence, and I'd call a family meeting. At 7:30 a.m. sharp, I knocked on Dad's office door. It opened into the same den he'd painted a warm taupe, with leather chairs and diplomas on the wall, his corner of the house. He looked up from his laptop, surprise turning to concern when he saw me carrying a stack of papers, albums, and my laptop. "Marcy? What's all this?" he asked. "Dad, we need to talk." Everyone. I dropped the folder on his desk. Long before I'd left for college, I'd learned that symbolism mattered. He cleared off a tray of business cards and sat, folding his hands. I took a breath. "I want Mom, you, and Claudia here at 8:30. In the living room." He blinked. "A family meeting, and I want every document I found on the rent notice, plus the original deed and mortgage papers." My voice steadied as I set the evidence on his desk. The rent notice, an email exchange between Claudia and her lawyer, the deed showing both our names, bank statements proving we paid the mortgage every month. Dad leaned back, chest tight. "Where did you get all this?" "I photocopied it at work last night. Actually, I did most of it online. It's all public record unless someone hides it, including a deed restriction that says we can't subdivide the property or lease it without both owners' signatures." I tapped the rent notice. "Claudia never signed this. You never signed it, and she never told you her lawyer advised it was illegal for her to demand rent from your own daughter." He stared at the pages like they'd just sprouted horns. I thought it was fine. Claudia said it was standard." His voice cracked. "Standard for Airbnb hosts. Maybe," I said. "But this is your home. Our home and mine before it was hers. Now she's housing clients in your guest room, charging your own daughter rent, and making you sign away half your rights without telling you." My anger flared. I saw her spreadsheets, her business plan for turning our home into an executive retreat. "It's on her laptop." He covered his mouth. "I didn't know. You didn't ask," I said. "And I shouldn't have had to." He sank forward, eyes on the floor. I took a calmer breath. "So here's what I propose. We sit down together with Mom and Claudia. We lay everything out. You apologize to me, then we nullify the rent notice together on paper, right now. We sign a new document stating I live here rent-free until I graduate, 5 more years, maybe 10, I don't know. And if Claudia wants to run a side retreat business, she has to do it somewhere else." He glanced at the pile of documents. The only sound was the soft air conditioner. Finally, he nodded. "Okay." I exhaled. "Great. Now let's get them." At 8:30 on the dot, I arranged everyone in the living room. Mom perched on the couch, surprise and sympathy on her face. Claudia sat opposite in an armchair, arms folded, face unreadable. Dad hovered between us, looking older, measured, worried. I cleared my throat. "I called this meeting because I love this house. I grew up here, I love you all, and I was surprised to discover yesterday that my stepmother thinks I'm a tenant, that I should pay rent, or move out." I held up the rent notice. "She sent me this." Claudia's jaw clenched. "Marcy, it was only $800 a month. It's reasonable. At your age, you should be learning responsibility." "Responsibility is cleaning my own bathroom without treating me like a maid." I shot back. "Responsibility is contributing in ways that make sense for my life. It's not extracting money from my college savings just because you think you can." Mom's eyes filled with tears. Dad cleared his throat. "Honey," he began, but Claudia cut him off. "He's an adult," she glared at me. "He can pay rent, or he can leave." "Then he'll leave?" Dad asked her. His voice was soft, but firm, like an oak creaking in wind. Claudia looked confused. "That's the agreement." I stepped forward. "No, it's not. You never signed it. We both own this house. You and Dad. I'm his daughter. If you want me to pay, you need his permission, and his signature. He's saying no, so that rent agreement is null and void." I handed Dad a new piece of paper, a clause waiver. I drafted on my laptop. "All you need to do is sign." Dad exhaled and took the paper. Mom stood, walking around behind him. She wrapped her arms around his shoulders. Dad turned and faced Claudia, the weight of years visible in his shoulders. He signed. Mom kissed the top of his head. Claudia's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at the signature and then at me. You had all this ready? I nodded. Yes. I spent last night researching tenancy laws. Her eyes flicked to Mom. This isn't just about the laws, she said. It's about respect. He needs to learn. Mom stepped in, softly. Respect is mutual, Claudia. If you want him to respect you, you have to respect him, and this is his home. Claudia's face turned a flush of anger and embarrassment. She stood. If that's how it is, she said, voice tight. I'll stay with my sister until I can figure out what happens next. She stormed out of the room. Silence. My heart pounded. I glanced at Dad, tears in his eyes. I stood and hugged him. Mom wrapped her arms around both of us. Over the next hour, Dad and I repaired the damage. He apologized to me for not standing up sooner, for letting Claudia treat me like a stranger in my own home. We hugged, and I saw how much this had hurt him, too. Mom joined us, her eyes gentle. I felt a swell of love for my imperfect, messy family. That afternoon, while Claudia stayed at her sister's, I took down the dustpan from the hall closet, carefully setting it beside my own vacuum. The house felt lighter, as though we'd exhaled a week's worth of stale tension. I mopped the kitchen floor, rearranged the cushions on the couch, and snapped photos on my phone of the changes, a small victory journal. That evening, Dad grilled burgers in the backyard. I set the table, my playlist of teenage favorites humming from the stereo. Mom made her special coleslaw, and Baxter wagged his tail at our feet. Our stepmother's side had been missing from the dinner, but the house felt whole again. During dinner, Dad raised his glass. To family when it's tough, it's good to work things out. He looked at me, to my daughter, who reminded me what home means. I smiled and lifted my soda. To home. Mom sniffed a happy tear. To home. Baxter barked. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like a tenant in my own home. I felt like a daughter, a sister, and a part of a family that after a rough patch still had room for love.